Welcome, friends, to another Wolf Responds. I call this one The War in Iran, Underappreciated Aspects. I know the war in Iran is getting a lot of attention, as well it should. And I know what that attention amounts to. And so I thought it might be interesting for you to hear about some of the aspects of this war that will shape its outcome, but are not getting the kind of attention, at least not in the United States and the West, that it ought to be getting. So let me take you through a few of them. You may know about them, but perhaps not quite in the way that I will treat them. Okay, I want to preface this by saying all wars are the result of many influences. I don't believe you can reduce any war to one thing. The fact that the leaders point to one thing, or the fact that the media demand to know what is the one goal of this operation, is a mistake. There's almost never one goal. There are many. In fact, in most wars, the people who decide to go to war are weighing factors that urge them to go and fight, and factors that are saying to them, don't do it. And that was certainly true here in this war with Iran. So I'm not saying what I'm talking about are the most important factors. What I do know is that they played a role and that they're not getting the attention they ought to. And that's why we're talking about them now. Okay, let's be blunt. One of the things a war does, whether you intend it or not, is to distract people from other things they were thinking about. To distract people from other things that the newspapers and the television and the internet were full of all day, every day. I'll give you an example. We were very busy as a nation for months now exploring the Epstein scandal. Who's involved? What did they do? How ugly and horrible can it get? We're not through that process. There are still millions of files that are somehow not yet released. And then those that are released are blacked out, so you can't see what we want to know and have every right to know. This was very embarrassing to President Trump, not only because he is one of the most frequently mentioned names in these files, because of a relationship he had that was clearly long and intense. And so the question rightly is, what did he know? When did he know it? What did he participate in? And so on. It doesn't go away. And it wasn't limited to the critics of Mr. Trump. It was clearly bothering his allies in and out of the MAGA community. Going to war, whatever other reasons might have provoked it, also offered itself as a way to distract people from Epstein. And think about it. Epstein's name has been less in the headlines the day this war started than it had been for weeks and weeks prior to that. A second aspect that gets underappreciated is the fact that we are having some very serious economic problems. I know the president says the economy is great, but the simple fact is, it isn't. Inequality is off the chart in this country. The rich are getting richer. Elon Musk signed a contract with his parent corporation so that between now and 2030, 4.5 years roughly, he will be paid a total of $1 trillion. Okay, but this is craziness, folks. The poor are not getting richer, but the rich are. And you know what that does? It makes the economy more unequal. 10% of our people own 80% of the shares of stock. When you hear that the stock market is where you should look, the answer is no, it isn't. The stock market is only where you look when you want to see how the top 10% are doing. They are doing quite well, thank you. And I can give you the reason in one word. The government has been pumping money into the economy in huge amounts over recent years, and that money has mostly gone into the stock market, bidding up the price of shares. That's great news for the top 10%. For them, the economy is great. But for the other 90%, you know, the ones who complain about there being too much month at the end of the money, for them, it's not good at all. And they know it. That's why poll after poll of the average American working class person shows that the issue that the Democratic Party wants to control by calling it affordability is exactly what the issue is. People can't afford the rent, the groceries, the car payments, all the rest. The people at the top doing much better. Stock market zooming, records passed. But for the average people, not at all. And the polls show it. Mr. Trump's popularity with average people is going down every month. He needs to distract people from this declining economic situation. And a war with Iran takes the headline, and instead of it being about the price of eggs goes crazy, or rents are up, or medical insurance is unaffordable, and instead you can see pictures of missiles crashing into buildings. It's all very exciting. It's a distraction. And here's the most important distraction of all, which gets the least attention. It is a well-known historical fact that when empires decline, after they've had 50, 100, 200, even 300 years of being an empire, rich and powerful. And here I'm talking about the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, you name it. We've had lots of rises and falls of empires. When they fall, what you often see is a war or two or three. Why? Because it distracts people. Remember, not the reason, not the only reason, but a contributor. The war distracts people from decline. In fact, the war has a special way of doing that, because when you fight a war, you can claim you're going out there to fight the war. You're aggressive, you're expanding, you're powerful, you're strong enough to initiate a war. You're not merely responding. The Iranians have the benefit of responding to an attack from the United States and Israel. The Iranians have the luxury of fighting for their home, for their town, for their apartment, for their car, for their Ayatollah. We don't. We're going over there. But you know, it gives the impression that we're strong, we're powerful, we can dominate and control another country over there in the Middle East. That's a way to distract Americans from the nagging thought that bothers many, that the empire is going down. And here's the last one for you to think about. There's an aspect of this war that the president doesn't want you to think about, but I want you to. It is interrupting the oil business. You know that. It's driving up the price of oil and of gasoline that is made by refining oil. And you know that too. But now here's something you may not know quite so well. The price of oil is going up everywhere. That is good news for countries that export oil because they're going to make a lot more money. And it's bad news for countries that have no oil, have to import it. And it's particularly bad news for the countries that have not stored any oil as a way of planning for the shortage, which has now been created by the attack on Iran and by Iran's response. But that's not it either. I want you to focus on the number one exporter in the world of oil and gas, and that's Russia. And for Russia, this is an immense windfall. As I make this tape right now, the price of oil is around $85 a barrel. That's about $25 a barrel more than it was for the last few years. That's an enormous increase in a matter of days. It means the money flowing into Russia has just shot up by 30-40%. An enormous benefit to Russia. And what will Russia use it for? Well, part of it will go to pay for the war in Ukraine. That's right. This is really bad news for Ukraine and for the Americans and Europeans that have been funding and arming Ukraine in this war. Russia just got a huge increase in the cash reserves it needs to fight the war. And that means that the United States faces two possible losses. The loss of the war in Ukraine, which is looking closer each day, and the possible loss of the war in Iran, which, far from being a war that was over in a few days, remember Mr. Trump suggested he could do that, don't look like it. Iran is a huge country. Iran is a mountainous country. Iran can hide missile silos the way nobody else possibly could. It's an underappreciated aspect of this war. And all I can say to you is, if the war in Ukraine is lost, and if the war in Iran is lost, it will not just be a declining empire of the United States that we will be talking about. It will be the end of that empire. That's really where we are, and that's the most underappreciated aspect of this war of all of them. If interventions like this strike you as interesting, as worth thinking